very short reading this morning, but full of lessons for us to learn. This week I found this familiar story, and it is a familiar story. If you've been in church for any amount of time, you would have come across this story. Even perhaps outside of church, you may have come across this story. And yet this story has been a tonic to my soul. It's been a benefit to my soul as I've read it and studied it. And I pray it's the same for you too today. Perhaps a familiar story, or even if it's an unknown story, speaks to you in a fresh way, in a meaningful way. And let's read God's word. Luke chapter 10, starting to read from verse 38. So just remember a little bit of context. We've been in Luke chapter 10 for a while. Jesus sent out his disciples to go and do the work that he's been doing, go and prepare the way for him for his visit. They've been acting in his power. They've been preaching the good news and making the good news of Jesus known. They've been performing all sorts of miracles and power, displays of power, just like he's displayed. And as they've returned, he's commended them, he's welcomed them. He himself is full of joy that his Father in heaven is using little children like these to build his kingdom. And then we have that parable that we looked at last week, the parable of the Good Samaritan. And then Luke continues in verse 38. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." The Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." When Jesus replies to Martha, he tells her that Mary has chosen the good portion. The good portion, your translation might say something a little different, but I'm happy with that one. He seems to be something of a play on words. Martha is busy making food, busy preparing food for the guests that have come to her home, while Mary is eating food. Mary's busy eating. And Jesus is saying, Mary has chosen what is right, what is best. She's got the good portion. She's got a good helping on her plate. It reminds us that this morning, Jesus has food for us to eat. Now, we're not allowed to give out food. That's one of the things that we've lost, isn't it? Our time of tea and coffee afterwards, and biscuit and cake and donuts. We're not able to do that. But God's word is telling us that there's a meal here for you. There's food to enjoy. There's something here to sustain you, to feed you, to build you up. There's food here. I don't know if you've had your breakfast this morning, but there's something more important than breakfast, even more important than the most important meal of the day. God's food. Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." And so as his word is opened, as the good news of the gospel, as the Lord Jesus Christ is explained in a room like this, on a screen like this, there's food for you. My question for you is, are you going to take it and eat it? There's a common understanding of this passage, which has been the subject of plenty of books and conference talks and potentially Sunday school lessons. And the idea is that we've got here in this passage two elements of the Christian life. The life of the activist, the doer in Martha, and the life of the contemplated learner, Mary, You can probably tell already that I'm not very convinced by it. I think we can be reading too much into what's a very small reading to pick out two personality types from what we've got there. We don't know, for instance, whether Martha had had a quiet time this morning. She may well have done. She may be very contemplative. She may be a great reader and prayer of scriptures. We don't know whether Mary had been looking after some waifs and strays earlier in the morning herself before Jesus had come along. She might have plenty of activism about her. I think it's putting too much on the text to say that I'm a Martha or I'm a Mary. I'm more of a contemplative type person. I'm more an activist. I don't think we've got enough knowledge of these two women to be able to do that. And worse than that, I think it takes away what this passage is all about. If our major takeaway is that the contemplative life, the thinking life, the sitting at the feet life is better than serving and doing, it clashes a little bit with the context, doesn't it? Can you remember what Steve was telling us last week about the Good Samaritan? Just look at the last words of that section in verse 37. And Jesus said to him, "You go and do likewise." Get out there and do it. He's just been speaking to some very contemplative people, or at least they were the caricatures of his parable. People who knew the word but weren't doing it. If ever there was those that prioritized the quiet, thinking, reading life, it's those characters that Jesus put in his story, and the story reflects badly on them. Two very religious men, avoiding doing good, walking by, no doubt to go and do some contemplating. So let's try. If that's been our understanding of this passage before, I'm not here to take anything away from you. If that's been a helpful way for you to look at it, I want to encourage you to have fresh eyes on the text. Firstly, I want us to see a silent scandal. A silent scandal. One thing that will perhaps help bring some freshness is if we're able to spot this scandal. And now I say catch sight of it, I say see it because you can't hear it. Nothing is spoken. It involves Mary. And you may have noticed in it a very vivid story, but a very short story of Jesus' interaction with these two sisters, that Mary doesn't say a word. Or at least that a word of Mary's isn't recorded. She's silent throughout. No record of what she has to say about the goings on around her. That's why I'm calling it a silent scandal. Some scandals are loud, aren't they? People are saying scandalous things. But this is an action. Verse 39, she had a sister, the she in that verse there is Martha. Martha had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. Sounds very scandalous, doesn't it? Someone sitting down and listening. Sounds very well behaved. Where's the scandal? Well, in those words, sat at the Lord's feet. Well, that's the key, really. If we think of someone sitting at someone's feet, we might be perhaps thinking of children in a primary school setting, sat down at their teacher's feet, perhaps a story time. When I was in primary school, there used to be a rug, a special story time rug that you'd sit on, and you'd come off your chairs and tables, sit on the rug, and your teacher would read you a story. That was your teacher, your time with the teacher, you listening to them. It's probably a helpful image to have. In Jesus' time, it wasn't something that just children did, but disciples did with their teachers. And later in Luke's second book, in the book of Acts, we read of Paul. Paul says of himself he's educated at the feet of Gamaliel. Sitting at the feet, being at the feet of someone, is the position of a disciple. It's what a follower does. They sit in a position of humility. We'll see in our verse it says the Lord's feet. It communicates submission and authority. The teacher's on the seat, you're on the mat. The teacher's elevated, you're sat down. You're waiting to receive what you can't give. It communicates identification. This is my teacher. And Paul with Gamaliel. Mary with Jesus. I am his. He is mine. He's my rabbi, my teacher, my Lord. It still doesn't seem very scandalous, does it? It's still just a disciple, somebody sitting at someone's feet and learning. And the reason perhaps that we can't see the scandal is our own context, our own place, our own position in history, our own culture that we live in today doesn't allow us to see the scandal, or perhaps prevents us from seeing the scandal. Mary here is in a very male context. She's in a male space. We hear quite a bit about spaces, don't we? And whether there should be gender-neutral spaces or gender-specific spaces. Well, here, Mary's in a male space. She's in a position, in a place where you associate a man to be and you wouldn't associate a woman to be. How many of you have seen the film Mulan? Or if you're a bit more cultural, you've sort of read the Chinese folklore story. It's a story of a woman in a man's world, isn't it? Taking the place of her father at battle. She disguises herself as a man so that she can belong, that she can infiltrate the army and fight for her nation and fight and save her father. Mary does no such thing. She doesn't pretend to be a man. She's happy as a woman, but sitting in that space. There's a boldness about her activity, a boldness about her action. Mary sat at Jesus' feet. And yet there's a simplicity to her discipleship. He is my Lord. He is my King. And the best place for me right now is right at his feet. And Luke has already made reference to women in chapter 8 and following and supporting the ministry of Jesus. It's a fascinating study to trace through all the references to the women through Luke's Gospel. Again, doesn't it sound patronizing to our ears? Why shouldn't he make reference to women? Why is that significant? Why isn't it 50-50? We wouldn't expect it. You wouldn't expect someone writing in Luke's day to pay that much attention to the women disciples, the women who were part of the story, let alone to give them such a prominent role, let alone to elevate them above men or even male leaders. And that's what he's doing in these passages. One of the dangers of our own perspective is it can cloud the fact that there are other perspectives, other traditions, other cultures. We can patronize the cultures of the world and the past by presuming our way is best. All I'm saying, that to the culture of the day, this scene was shocking. A first century Jewish rabbi with a woman sat at his feet. A woman in a male-only zone, identifying as one of his disciples, in a seat of learning. What are we to see? Well, more than a scandal. Luke isn't interested in scandal for the sake of scandal. He's not like a tabloid newspaper saying, look who's going out with who. Look what they've done. Look at them with no makeup. It's not that sort of scandal. He's not about shock and gossip. His purpose is the message. And the message is revolutionary. So he puts shocking examples in so that you see how shocking, how wonderful, how surprising this message is. And Jesus is a rabbi like no other. His ministry, his impact, the kingdom of heaven coming into this Jewish culture breaks cultural molds. It's not restricted by them. It's not confined by the rules and the conventions of the day. It's not breaking them for the sake of breaking them. It's breaking them where they've gone too far, where they constrain too much. There's a good thing, isn't there? Perhaps something that our society is losing. And that's a distinction between the genders. That's a good thing. The Bible tells us that there are two genders, male and female. The distinction is good. But that distinction, that good thing, has become a bad thing. It's become divisive. One has risen above the other. The difference between the two has led to suppression of women by men. And here we can see Jesus liberating women. He's happy with her, sat at his feet. We can see them as part of the movement, belonging, engaged, involved, financing. They're integral to what's going on. And that's revolutionary. It's not in our day and age, but in that day and age. And so we apply the revolution, we apply the lesson to our own day. You need to recognize what a radical book the Bible is. Last week, Luke was recording Jesus telling a story where the bad guys were the religious elites. Jewish religious leaders. They were the comedy bad guys in the story. The next passage is a woman who isn't doing her role. She's letting her sister do her role, and she's the hero. And can you see how the convention has been turned upside down? Can you see something of a scandal? Again and again, Luke is showing us that Jesus is interested in the marginalized. He's interested in the forgotten, the ignored, the misunderstood. He has room for them. That's an offer to you. If you feel like that you fit in that category, if you feel marginalized, if you feel on the edge, that's telling you that this Jesus, this Son of God, is for you. Jesus has room for you. He's interested in you. There's space at his feet for someone just like you. It's a challenge to those of us who are in the dominant culture. In every society, well, I don't really know that this is a factor every day. In most societies, there would seem to be a dominant culture. There would seem to be one culture that sort of runs the show. Most people are a part of it, or at least the powerful people are a part of it. And if you're in that culture, if you're part of that dominant culture, do you make space for those on the outside? Do you make space for their voice? Are you interested in them? Like Jesus is. When you read of the marginalized in our city, in our community, do you ask the Lord to make you welcoming and kind and useful to that group? Are you ready to be radical and to reach out to them and have them included in all the things that you're about? A silent squabble. A silent scandal. Secondly, a sibling squabble. A sibling squabble. We've got quite a bit, haven't we, from just a scene of a lady sitting down. A scene that Luke's original readers would have found shocking. But if we had to stop, we might not have seen anything particularly shocking. Now we move on to something which I imagine transcends cultures. I wonder how many sibling squabbles have happened already this morning. Even in the houses of big church families, how many sibling squabbles have gone on? How many arguments have happened between brothers and sisters, sisters already today? You can imagine, can't you? A brother, a sister feeling angry with what another sibling has done. And in their response, either taking a quick swipe at them, "That's mine! You can't do that!" Or perhaps more likely shouted, "Mom! Dad!" Luke gives us all the details of this sibling squabble. It's Martha's house. We get that at the start. It's her house that's welcoming Jesus. She has welcomed him. It seems shorthand that she's the host. Her house, her welcome, she's doing that job. Some writers tell me that her name, Martha, sort of means mistress as well, hostess. That gives some emphasis to the story. And we presume from the way the story is written that she's the older sibling as well. Now, just as we saw Mary's actions were shocking to that culture, well, if that's the case, then Martha's are not. Martha's doing what you'd expect a host to do. She is busying herself with her duty. She's preparing food for Jesus and whoever else has come with Jesus. She's doing her role. She's doing good work. The work that she's doing isn't the problem. Try and place yourself in Martha's position. You're the host of a party or some sort of gathering, and you feel that sense of responsibility. Children, perhaps you've had friends over for a party in your house, not this year maybe, but a previous year, and you feel that sense of responsibility. My mate's going to have a good time. Are they going to enjoy this? Is Dad going to say something embarrassing? You have that sense that as people come, how are they going to experience your house? How are they going to experience your hospitality? How will that reflect on you? Well, that's the sort of thing no doubt is going through Martha's head. She loves Jesus and she recognizes that he is a special gift from God. And she wants to welcome him. She wants to do a really good job of that. She wants Jesus to have a good time in her house. She's working hard, slaving over a hot stove, baking bread, pouring wine, stirring the stew, whatever she's making. And as she does, she begins to get overwhelmed. Luke tells us she's distracted. Her focus becomes her duties. It's easy. The overriding focus is on all that she must do. We're coming up to Christmas, aren't we? And it'll be someone's responsibility, no doubt, to prepare some sort of Christmas dinner. For perhaps a smaller crowd, but a crowd all the same. Anyone who's done that task will surely know something of the pressure that Martha is under, what she's going through, what she's thinking and feeling. As she does, she calls for Mary. I'm using my imagination, I hope you understand. We're trying to enter into Martha's headspace. She calls on Mary to give her a hand. She's stirring or she's scrubbing pots. Mary. She tries louder and louder to find her sister. Where is she? She's got so much to do. Eventually she finds her sitting down at Jesus' feet. Martha, hot, bothered, flustered, in our words, stressed. Mary sat quietly, calmly, sitting. It's enough to send anyone into a spin, isn't it? Enough to wind anybody up. It's bad enough being stressed. It's bad enough being under pressure. But seeing people alongside you who could be helping out, not doing anything, not lifting a finger, makes it all the worse. And then we have these words. Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me. Martha asked this question in a way that demands the answer yes. She sets it up. The only way Jesus can answer now is yes. He can only confirm what I'm saying. He can only confirm my emotion. She's absolutely convinced she's in the right. Just like every time you go, Mom, Dad, you only do that when you're convinced. If you think there's a chance that you're going to get in trouble, you don't shout out. Martha's convinced. Let's have a little closer look at these two short sentences. I wonder if any of these things come up when you're upset. Let's have a look. Do you not care? You ever say that to your parents? Don't you love me? Don't you care? As you're trying to explain the injustice, you're trying to explain what's gone on between you and another sibling. Well, as Martha tries to bring Jesus in to help her side of the argument, she starts off with, don't you care? There's an emotional pull, a tug of the heartstrings. Do you do that? Martha did that. That my sister. She did it. Look what she's doing. You see her pointing the finger? It's a really short sentence with this load packed into it. Don't you care that my sister, look at her right now. Look at the state I'm in. Look how happy she is. Has left me, all deserted, all alone. She's building a little story, isn't she, of how she's the victim. Left me to serve. She's using that word of service, ministry, looking after the work that she's doing. She's justifying herself. She's not just pointing to her sister, but she's pointing back at herself and saying, look at all the things that I've done. Left me to serve alone. Sympathy. And now, having built that very short but very persuasive case, comes the crunch. Tell her then to help me. It's kind of dry, isn't it? All that sound familiar? That happen in your home? Do you behave like that? Adults, do you behave like that? Does it happen in your own heart? Do you become so focused on all that you have to achieve that you become distracted, that you lose perspective, that you become so conscious of another's behavior that it incenses you and you burst out with all sorts of accusations? Do you tell yourself and anyone else who will listen all about the pressure that you're under and the good that you have done, justifying yourself? Do you keep telling yourself the same story in which you're either the victim or the hero? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we're never the victim. I'm not saying we never go through a trial that we should share or talk to people about. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying we should never talk about our anxieties or our troubles or the things that are distracting us. It's important that we do. I'm saying, what does a passage like this reveal about our own hearts? How do we react and respond in hard times reveals our hearts. When we come under pressure, when we come under stress and strain, it shows us what we're really like, what we feel we deserve, what we think is right, how we think God should run the universe, who we think God should accept. Let's not forget that Martha is speaking to Jesus. She's speaking to the Son of God. She's coming before him with a case. She's not coming before a mere mum or dad. She is so convinced by the injustice that she's willing to recruit God onto her side. Recruit him in such a way that she fully expects him to back her up. This is another reason why I don't think this passage is about a contemplative Mary and an active Martha. The passage puts before us, as we've seen, a silencing of Mary. Sister has left me to serve alone. Tell her then to help me. It's all ready for her. The way the question has been asked, Jesus is supposed to say, of course I can. Mary, get on with you. Get into that kitchen and help your sister. It demands a positive answer. But Jesus is now going to correct Martha is not what's expected. Notice how Jesus deals with her softly. Martha, Martha. He's about to cut right across her. She has every expectation that Jesus is coming with her, and he's not. But he's not going to do her harm. He's not going to cut across her in a harsh manner. Martha, Martha. Twice he speaks her name. There's an intimacy there. That was a pattern in the time of speaking intimately to another. One commentator I was reading drew attention to Jesus saying, do you remember of those on the last day that say to Jesus, Lord, Lord? What are they doing in that moment when they say, Lord, Lord? They're claiming an intimacy. They're claiming to know him. And what does Jesus say to them? Away from me. I never knew you. It was a false intimacy. They were claiming it with that Lord, Lord. And here the intimacy is genuine. He loves her. He loves Martha. And he wants her to know it. Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. He doesn't ignore all that consumes Martha. He recognizes her trouble, her anxiety, her trial. He speaks of it. Just stop for a minute. If you've zoned out in the room, in your living room, in your kitchen, wherever you are, if you've zoned out, zone back in. Just stop. As Jesus speaks like this to Martha, he's speaking like this to you. In place of Martha, Martha, can you put your own name? Is he your Saviour? Does he speak your name twice? Does he know you intimately? If so, he says to you, you are anxious and troubled about many things. I know you are. I see them. I see those troubles. I see those hardships. I see those pressures. I know the pain that you're in. It's not new information for me. I see all of it. I know the season. I know the trial. I know your suffering. I know it. I know your name. But that doesn't mean there isn't a correction. That doesn't mean there isn't something else for Jesus to say. That isn't all that Jesus says to Martha. There is change required. There is a refocus needed. He's not disputing the anxiety. He's not disputing the trouble. There is one thing necessary. You are anxious and you are troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Just one. You've lost sight of it. In the busyness, in the trouble, in the pressure, in the stress, in the strain, a legitimate activity. But caught up in that, you've lost sight of it. You've lost sight of something all important. There's something essential. There's someone essential. You've lost sight of me. Those things are good and proper in their place. But don't let them have your heart. Don't let them have all of you. Don't let them distract you from the main thing. One thing is necessary. I am necessary, says Jesus. Just me. I'm what you need in this moment. I'm what you need in every moment. Now comes the blow. If you've ever been in a squabble with your sibling, today, yesterday, whenever, and you take that case to your parents, what you're looking for is their complete support. You build a case like Martha because you're trying to convince them of your story. You're trying to convince them of the injustice that you faced. And so what you're after is 100% support. You might settle for 50-50. You might settle for you're both as bad as each other. Or as my dad used to say to me and my brother, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Tweedledum and Tweedledee. And one of us would say, he's done. What you don't want to hear, the last thing you want to hear is, your sister has done well. Learn from her. Can you imagine? You are completely convinced that you've got it right. So convinced that you go and bring a parent, bring an authority figure in to settle it for you. And rather than saying, it's 50-50, rather than saying you're right, they go, actually, I'm going to side with your sister. Jesus says, Mary has chosen the good portion which will not be taken away from him. And they're the words that we started with. They're the words that I asked you as children to focus on as you thought about Christmas. Mary has chosen a good portion, which will not be taken away from her. And what's Jesus saying here? It seems to be a play on words. Mary has the meal while Martha is busy making one. Mary has been sat feasting. Martha's been busy cooking. As good a work as Martha's is not to consume her. The food that she lovingly makes will be eaten, digested, or it'll go off and spoil. The food that Mary is eating is not going anywhere. It can't. It can't be taken from her. But what distracts you? What frustrates you? What makes you anxious? Full of worry? What consumes your mind and through your mind then takes over your heart and soul? Is it taking you away from the ultimate one? Is it preventing you from feasting on him? Is it stopping you from enjoying him? The Lord of the universe has come into Martha's home. And Mary's done right. Mary's done well. She sat at his feet, recognizing who he is and what he's got to give her. Sit and receive. Feed upon him. Martha is ready to feed Jesus, and it's a good thing that she wants to do. Mary is convinced that she needs to feed upon him, to taste and see that the Lord is good, to enjoy him. That doesn't mean that you cease to be active. It doesn't mean you stop doing good. The rest of Luke chapter 10 won't allow us to do that. That's why the understanding, I think, is skewed that we looked at before. Mary has made an excellent choice. It's not an easy one, is it? Martha's accusing her of doing something easy. She's not working hard with me, but Mary's choice isn't easy. It's not an easy choice to make. There is activity there. Real activity on Mary's part. Real spiritual activity. Sitting and receiving. It means stopping from your work. Not doing that work. Focusing on the Saviour in that moment. Not justifying yourself, but receiving the justification that he alone can bring. It's about being honest with yourself and honest before God. Recognizing, as you sit, I'm a sinner, and my great need is a Saviour. I'm a creature, and I'm completely dependent on my Creator. I am weak, but he is strong. I am foolish, but he is wise. I'm evil, but he is good. The best place is at his feet, feeding on his word. Are you feeding on it? Do you have that good portion that won't be taken away? It's a free meal, isn't it? It's a picture of the gospel here, that we're recipients. We come to Christ with our hands open, ready to receive. His are the only hands that can give this food. The hands, as the hymn goes, that flung stars into space, to cruel nails surrendered. Those hands are the only hands that can give us this food, to hand you the bread of life. And don't let the distractions, the trials, the anxieties of this life, the good activities, the good ministries, the good service, the good responsibilities and duties that may well begin to take over. Don't let any of them rob you from the feast that is Jesus.